Speaker of the Converge series, sponsored by the Scripps College of Communications. Matt Kelland will be our speaker today, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about Matt. I'd also like to thank the people who have put this together. Technical assistance with Kevin Price and the WOUD Center for Public Media. We really appreciate your technical support and promotion of the series. I'd like to thank Eric Rothenbuehler, the Associate Dean of the College of Communications, Scripps College of Communications, to help putting this together. Julio Arauz, who helped coordinate all of this, and then Rebecca Sell, Hans Meyer, Laura Black, and myself, as well as Julio, put together one speaker each, and so that created the 5 speakers that are here on campus this quarter. So, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Matt Kelland, who started UK Online back when people were just beginning to explore the internet, and it quickly became one of the top visited sites on the internet in the mid-90s. He moved from there into telephone games and design, created a company that made such telephone games called In-Game.
Yep.
And then from there, invented something that I really fondly play with called Movie Storm, a software program that helps you design movies and pre-visualize them. He actually used the pre-visualization software in order to make a feature film, put it online, and got over 1 million hits. He's now moving into digital publishing, and so it's always interesting to see what Matt is interested in next. He's going to speak to us today. His topic is called Truly Social Media, and you will all please welcome Matt Kelland.
Okay, thank you for having me here. So yeah, social media, truly social media. I'm not going to be talking about Facebook and Twitter. I might mention them a little bit in passing, but that to me is not what social media means. What I'm interested in, I trained as an anthropologist, and I'm interested in the way that digital media is changing and shaping our entire society. I think what we're seeing here is a revolution, a communications revolution, which is more fundamental than anything that's actually happened in the last 10,000 years of human history. The last time something this major happened to change our way of life was when we invented cities and agriculture. Since then, we've seen various other inventions come. Every major change in human society has been a communications revolution, and this one is bigger than any of them. From a personal point of view, I'm talking about the way that digital media has changed books, it's changed music, it's changed comics, it's changed film and TV, photography, letters, phone calls, Christmas cards, corporate brochures, reference materials, newspapers, advertising, the way I relate to my friends, the way I relate to my family, the way I do my job, even my health. It's affecting our culture, it affects our laws, it affects our personal relationships, everything. And it works on a personal level, it works on a corporate level, it works on a national level, and it's working on a global level. I mean, really, digital media is affecting every part of our life in ways that we're only just beginning to understand. And the important thing for me is that understanding digital media doesn't require technologists anymore. When I started doing this stuff, if you wanted to talk about digital media, you needed to know how to program, you needed to understand computers. The reason why digital media is so effective is that you don't need to understand any of those things anymore. Preschoolers can do it. My mum can do it. Anybody can do this. You can pick up an iPhone or an iPad or whatever, and you can engage with social media. Digital media requires sociologists, it requires anthropologists, it requires people who understand people, because it's not about technology, it's about people. Last conference I was at on virtual worlds in Atlanta a couple of years ago, we realized that over half the people in the room were sociologists and anthropologists. Nobody was interested in server technologies or concurrent logins or database management systems. That's just a technical problem. We've got people to solve that. People were far more interested in how do leaders arrive? How do customs arrive? How do we deal with disputes within these virtual worlds? How do we decide what's acceptable and what's not acceptable? And why do some virtual worlds evolve differently to others? What we're seeing is little experimental labs for testing out sociology. That's an incredible thing that we've never had before. So let me just sort of step back and say, well, why do I think digital media has been so amazingly powerful and made such fundamental changes? And I'm going to step back to when I was where you guys are now, just starting off my university career in the early 1980s. Let's look at the world back in the mid-80s. If you wanted to buy something, you went to a shop. That was all there was to it. You went to a shop. You want to take photographs? It cost you money for every photograph you wanted to take. Video, that's something only rich people could afford because video cameras were expensive and most people didn't even know anybody who had one. If you wanted to know what was happening in the world, you bought a newspaper or you tuned into a TV news bulletin at the right time. If you're a band, you wanted to record something, you may be able to record something on a cassette in your garage, or you paid out money to hire a studio and have them do it for you. And if you were lucky, they had, a 4-track mixer. In many ways, the world of the 1980s wasn't that much different to the world of the 1960s. Apart from, obviously, the fashions were different, the music was different. And the world of the 60s wasn't that different to the world of the 1940s, except that more people had cars and more people had color TV. What's happened since then, the life is so different, isn't it? Unbelievable. So yeah, 1985, I was an undergraduate at Cambridge, and I was a bit of a weirdo, partly because I had long purple hair and purple fingernails, and I rode a motorcycle, and I wore a hat with a big feather in it and stuff. But more to the point, I was the first undergraduate to submit my essays and my weekly work on a word processor. It was all a bit weird, because before then I was trying out a typewriter, and typewriters were horrible. But I was doing stuff on a word processor because they were cheap and easy. This had a very interesting side effect that none of us expected, which was that I found myself being the person who put together all the newsletters for all the clubs and societies that I joined. Because we didn't have to worry about a Xeroxing machine, we didn't have to worry about going to a print shop or anything like that. We could just put stuff together in my room. And my society suddenly became really revitalized as people wanted to contribute and they wanted to see themselves in print. These newsletters were not very good. They were what you expect of 18 and 19-year-olds who suddenly for the first time have access to being able to say what they want to say about things. But it was really liberating, and suddenly we felt that we had a voice and we enabled our communities to grow because of that. And our membership grew because we were communicating with people in new and exciting ways. Fast forward that about another 3 years to where I left university and I started work as a journalist. And we were using those very same word processors to put our magazine together. And it was a little outfit of 3 people specializing in reporting on African politics and African economics. Very, very niche field. Along came digital typesetting for the first time. We could lay out our pages just on a computer in our office with just a few of us. So we're saving money by not having to use expensive typesetters and not having to take things off to a printer. This meant that we could spend the money getting more journalists. And what happened was that this little outfit of 3 people were able to take on some of the really big organizations. Because at that time, if you wanted to know what was happening in Africa, you had to subscribe to the Economist Intelligence Unit, who would issue you with 2 bulletins a year at an average price of $1,500 per issue, per country. We were able to put this out for a fraction of that cost. This was the first experience I had of digital technology really empowering people to get this voice. Now again, run this forward a little bit further, another couple of years, 1990, and I left journalism, started working in computing because computing seemed like an interesting field to be in. It was still a little bit new, but worth a try. And that's when I discovered email. And for me personally, email was an incredible thing. My father went to Australia when I was a baby, and I never met him, never saw him. Occasionally we'd have a phone conversation once a year at Christmas, and at that point, phone calls to Australia cost approximately $20 a minute. So you can imagine a phone call would be, hey, how are you? Everything's good. Yes, that's fine. Click, hang up. I was lousy at writing letters. He was lousy at writing letters. But with email, we were exchanging messages daily for almost no money, the price of local phone calls, pennies. Suddenly, I'm discovering that my world extends to the opposite side of the planet, to people I can have a daily communication with and daily conversation with. Totally shattered my world wide open. Run it forward another couple of years. The web, 1993, as was mentioned, I was working for a company called UK Online, where we had this crazy idea that we were going to put the internet in people's homes. There was just one minor problem. We needed to persuade them to buy computers first, but we put the internet in people's homes. And I had this idea that maybe we could persuade people that they would upload books and other people could download them and read them. It took another 18 years before Smashwords finally did it, but we were trying it way back then. And we also had this other crazy idea that instead of just them browsing around the web to see what was there, how about we let our customers create their own websites? This was actually a pretty radical idea because AOL didn't want you to do that. AOL wanted you to look at the sites that they'd put together for you. We said, no, let anybody come and build their own site. We gave them a whole megabyte to play with, which was a lot of space in those days. You could put a lot of words in a megabyte. And suddenly we find that people are out there talking about the things that interest them. It didn't matter whether that was their favorite recipes, or where they'd been on their holidays, or some cure for asthma, or their collection of Wonder Woman comics and memorabilia, or even pictures of their cats. That's what people wanted to talk about. And not only did people want to talk about it, but there were other people out there who wanted to read about it. And we were successful, not because we were putting out lots of corporate information, but because we were enabling ordinary people to talk to each other about things that they were interested in. Basically, gossip. That's what people wanted to know about. Gossip, just talking to each other on the web. All you needed to do that was a computer, a phone line, some basic HTML skills. Forward that another couple of years, you didn't even need basic HTML skills. You didn't need to know anything. You just stuck the disk in, it would connect to your computer, and you could then drag and drop. And all of a sudden, you've got even more people suddenly starting to communicate. So the two huge effects here is, first of all, ordinary people were no longer constrained by the gatekeepers of publishing. Now, I don't know if are you guys familiar with Sturgeon's law? Sturgeon's law is 99% of everything is crap. Okay? It's true. And it doesn't matter whether you're looking at professional stuff or amateurs, it's pretty much true. 99% of everything is crap. The same was true once everybody gets onto the internet. Yeah, there's a load of crap out there, but the fact is that people could say what they wanted to say. In the world of the 1980s and the early 1990s, you either had to fund getting yourself printed, which was a big upfront cost, and most people couldn't do it, or you had to persuade somebody else to invest their money in printing what you wanted to say. By the world of the mid-1990s, you could say what you wanted to say, and nobody was going to stop you. You could put up anything you liked. All of a sudden, people have a voice. And the other side effect of this is that you suddenly find that new forms of community are appearing. It didn't matter what your interest was. Up until the early 90s, if you wanted to find people interested in your stuff, you were constrained to the people who were physically in the same location as you, the people in your town, the people in your part of your city. You may have a few pen pals around the place, but they weren't the people you communicated with very much. And your community was very, very geographically censored. In the world of the internet, that was shattered. The whole concept of space opened up massively. I mean, from a personal point of view, I remember discovering this when there was a particular bit of British military history that I was fascinated by. Nobody else I knew was even remotely interested in it. I posted something up on the web, and within days I got replies from academics in the US, in the UK, and in India, from authors who'd written books on the subject. Even though those books were out of print, they sent me copies of the books. I was talking to wargamers who were interested in the same thing. The end result was I met a load of people interested in the same stuff, I contributed to some books, and I helped write some games. Just through that expansion of the community and finding that those 50 people scattered around the whole world were suddenly there for me. You're trying to, until you've experienced that expansion of your world, it's very hard to explain how profound that is. 1999, so again, just jumping forward another 3 years. Mobile technology comes in. Okay, there've been mobile phones before then, the size of a small car, and then they got down to the size of a brick, and then finally they got down to the size of something you could actually carry around, like this, and that was great. Because again, the concept of space gets shattered. You could talk to anybody, anytime. I didn't have to be at work to be at work. People didn't need to know where I was. I could do what I wanted, where I wanted. This also starts to shatter the concept of time as well, which is very important. This is something I'm going to come back to. Because all of a sudden, you've gone from this world where work is happening between 9 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the office to you're always available anytime, any place. And that's when I started to see people working away on the train to and from work. Everybody's bringing work home with them. All of a sudden they've got laptops. Their whole office is mobile. And people are starting work, 7:30 in the morning, they're standing on the station ready to go. They're talking on the phone to people because they're working already. 8 o'clock, they're on the train, they've got the laptop out, they're working. Then they do the full day in the office, and then they've got another hour and a half on the way home. People are taking work home at the weekends. And suddenly time becomes a lot more flexible with what you do. Side effect of that, of course, is you get home working. And the way you start to relate was changing. All these things which just weren't possible in the 80s. This is when the pace really picks up. By 2000, I had a camera in my phone. I had no idea what it was for. What was the point of having a camera in my phone? Because I've got a camera in my pocket. Why do I need one on my phone? Nobody quite knew. It just seemed like a good idea at the time, so Nokia put one in and said, let's put a camera in the phone and see what happens. Well, a year later, they had the concept of actually being able to connect your phone to an internet properly. And then I could take a picture and I could upload it. Suddenly means that we're shattering time and space again. You guys can see what I'm doing as soon as I'm doing it. I see it, I photograph it, I put it up. I'm bringing people into my world, expanding what I'm getting. And then I'm getting feedback from people right away. Those people who aren't present with me can share an experience with me. Another huge change. Then along comes video. And people are starting to shoot video. And I think, sitting on this camera here, I've actually got 3 different video cameras. I've got the standard iPhone camera, an 8mm camera, and a 16mm camera. Okay, they're all simulated in software, but that's the equivalent of carrying around a huge bag of camera stuff. It's just there. I can shoot things in different ways, and it's fun. We've got huge changes going on in the last few years. Flickr and Photo Bucket is what people do with their photographs. They don't just take photographs and keep them in a drawer and pull them out to show people or do slideshows of the holidays. Everything's out there and being shared. Paper books being crushed by Kindle. In a few years, paper books will go the way of vinyl records. CDs are on their way out. I mean, those were fairly new 20 years ago. They're gone. Nobody buys CDs. We've got MP3s. We've got Spotify. We've got Pandora. Who the heck needs any kind of physical medium these days? Film and TV are being crushed by Netflix and by Hulu and by the streaming services. And YouTube only started in 2005. And already, more video gets put up in YouTube in a single day than was created in the whole of the 1940s and 1950s put together. Yeah, that is a stunning amount of stuff being created. More information is put onto the web every day. More words put on the web every day than exist in the whole of the Library of Congress. There are millions of people are creating digital content. Hundreds of millions of people are creating digital content, and hundreds of millions more are watching, reading, listening, downloading, and engaging with it in an absolute explosion of what's happening. It's hitting the preschoolers. It's hitting, seniors are doing it. Yesterday, I was flying over. I was sat on the plane next to an elderly couple, and as they were getting ready to take off, they pulled out their video camera, and they were looking at their little pictures of them going around Disneyland and saying, we have to share this with our granddaughter in Australia. So I kind of assume, okay, when they get back, they're going to plug this into something and find a way of burning it out on a CD and sending it. Oh, no. The guy turns around and said, well, when we get over 10,000 feet, we can log on to the Wi-Fi. It only costs $5. So they log on to the Wi-Fi, and they're sending their home video of them in Disneyland straight from their video camera to YouTube somewhere over North Carolina, and then chatting to their daughter in Australia about it via Skype. Wow. That was just incredible. And then when they finished that, they both pulled out their Kindles and started reading. It's the same in third world countries. We think we're really advanced here with what we've got. Let's remember that all over Africa, all over China, all over Southeast Asia, everybody's using mobile phones. More people use mobile phones to access the internet than use desktops or laptops or PCs. because mobile web is huge over the third world. You know, there's more mobile phone users in India than the rest of the world put together, and they're all using digital media. So yeah, it's huge. So let's look at, how does this really affect the way we live? Why do I think this is so fundamental? I mean, that's a nice little history lesson of, hey, life was different when I was a kid. But let's just look at what this actually means and how it affects our society. And there's four main areas that I want to look at, which is the way that anthropologists normally divide the world up. We've got work and the economy, we've got culture, we've got family life and personal relationships, and then we've got political frameworks. And every single one of those, I believe, has been fundamentally affected by digital media. Start with the economy. The great thing about digital media is that you have the ability to reach anyone, anywhere. So you have the ability to sell to anyone, anywhere. This means that a whole bunch of new classes of business can arise. You don't have to worry about whether you've got enough people in your local area to do business. You have to worry about whether there exist enough people in the world to do business. So whole new classes of business can arise that could not possibly have existed before. You've got home working has suddenly become a lot more popular. Flexibility in working. Our working hours have changed. The places we work have changed. We're seeing dispersed teams where people are scattered all over the place, but it doesn't matter because they're all communicating via instant messenger, via video conferencing or whatever. One of the companies I work, or two of the companies I work with now, no member of the team has yet met another member of the team in person. And they're scattered all over the US and Europe. But we just work as a perfectly functional company. We don't have office. We all work out of our own homes. Those kind of businesses could not have existed before digital technology. But this comes at a price. If you go into any town, anywhere in the Western world, it's changed. Shops are closing. It's really, really hard for regular retail shops to compete with the internet because of the expense of having bricks and mortar and looking after having a retail environment and having staff there. Productivity has changed massively. So yeah, these tiny teams can now do something and they can afford to engage. They can afford to do something with 2 or 3 people that might have taken 10 people 20 years ago. Of course, this means that larger businesses can let people go. They don't need as many employees. That puts pressure on the job market. You go into the towns, not only those shops going as well, because they can't afford to employ people, they can't afford to put it, but those support services. The cafes aren't there because you haven't got so many people coming into town. That's what they do on a Saturday is go shopping because they've already done their shopping on a Wednesday evening at 11 o'clock. Just grabbed what they need, gone online and bought it, and Amazon deliver it the next day. Amazon, they've pretty much taken out every business in the world has been hurt by Amazon because you can buy anything from Amazon cheaper than you can buy it anywhere else. That's a scary prospect. Digital content changes payment models, not just who's in business, but how we do business. We expect a vast amount of what we get now to be free because we all think, okay, digital content doesn't cost anything to copy, it should be free. And I'm not even talking about piracy. This is something I'll come back to that later. But I'm not talking about illegal copies of stuff that's free, but companies give their stuff away for free. They're also busy trying to build market share that more and more we're seeing people saying, have my product for free and then I'll find a way of making money out of it later. Well, guess what? There's always somebody else giving it away for free. You just go to the next person in line as soon as they start charging you. That makes it really, really hard. Working in the book publishing business, authors are busy trying to get themselves known, so they give their books away to try and get some Amazon ranking, to try and get reviews. I'm getting offered 100 to 150 books every single day for free, saying, come and get my book on Kindle, see what you think. That's more than I could ever possibly read, and even if I just take the best 1% of those, that's still more books than I can ever possibly read. And they're not bad books. It's not to say that, if it's free, it can't be any good. No, this is good quality books. The same way you can get good quality software for free. You can get good quality music for free. There's loads of people who will offer their services. Pandora, don't pay for it if you don't want to. Listen to all the music you like. We don't care. And even where they are charging, something like Skype, You can talk to anybody around the world. It doesn't cost you anything. If you want to be able to talk direct to their phone rather than VoIP, it'll cost you $10 a month. Big deal. That's nothing compared to your phone bill. Netflix, $10 a month. Watch all the movies you like. Again, that's nothing compared to your cable bill. That changes business models. And it's really hard for companies to survive in an era where are they making money when everyone's assuming that everything's cheap? And there's a huge, almost race to the bottom there. And then there's the whole concept of how corporates communicate with their customers. It used to be, you had a very, very restrictive view. 9 to 5, the rest of the time, you weren't available. Now, corporates are expected to be available and able to respond 24/7. The speed of the internet is such that if something goes wrong, if they have a PR disaster, it happens within hours. And somebody had better be jumping on Twitter or Facebook or whatever and responding to those complaints fast. Okay, so I mentioned Twitter and Facebook once. There we go. You've got to respond fast. And people are expected to respond with a human face. They don't want to see some faceless corporate bullshit. No one's interested in that. They want to see human beings. Humor has now become a really powerful marketing tool. It always has been to some extent, but they want to see people who are able to laugh, able to joke, able to make fun. People who are, they're going to come up with witty viral marketing campaigns that poke fun at their own product. Don't take yourself so seriously. That's really hard for corporates to try and understand that they have to work to engage consumers on a personal level, but they have to do it to 1 million people. It's a big, big challenge for the large companies how to do that. On the other hand, and looking at it the other way, corporate transparency is a huge issue. Look at what happened to BP over the whole Deepwater thing. They put up some photographs which were photoshopped, and within hours, people were putting them up and saying, that's the original photograph, there's the Photoshop, they're lying to us. And that mistake, that PR mistake, probably cost them literally millions not in legal fees and in the amount of damages they were expected to pay, because more and more people looked at them and said, you are a bunch of liars. We caught you out lying, so we don't believe your corporate excuses for why things went wrong. And it prejudiced people against them. So then what we're seeing then is a world in which business has changed. The way that businesses do business is different. The type of businesses are different. The place that business happens is different. The way that we work is different. More and more now we're in a world where job security does not exist because everything moves so fast. You're not going to grow up into a world where you're likely to work for the same corporation for 25 or 30 years. It's going to keep changing. And that changes how you feel about your employer. It changes the whole deal with that employer. Are they going to look after you for the rest of your life? No, they're not. They're going to look after you for a few years, then they're going to change, something else is going to change, you're going to move on. That changes your career structure. So moving on to the next area, cultural change. This is one of the things I'm most fascinated by, is the fact that because you've suddenly got this whole digital world available to you, you can draw cultural influences from an unbelievable range of sources. You can draw stuff from around the whole world. When I was first getting into the internet, we were talking about this thing called anime, and it was really hard to get hold of. We were trying to say to people, hey, the anime stuff is really cool, and it's a bit different to American animation. But you had to work really hard to find an importer. Nowadays, that stuff's everywhere. In many places, it's more popular than homegrown animation. People think nothing of watching the latest Japanese cartoons and so on. Films that I always wanted to see when I was growing up, that I read about, but they were never shown on TV, they're never shown in movie theaters, they're available on Netflix, they're available on the Internet Archive, they're all over the place. And all of those are there. There's a range of music that normally I would never get to hear of. You can just go online and listen to these bands and see what there is. And things like Spotify will recommend new stuff to you, and your friends will recommend new stuff. And the sheer breadth of cultural influence is huge. And what we're seeing is that creators are just able to draw on many things and come up with whole new styles of content, whole new styles of media, not just from the influences, but from mashing things up, putting stuff together and churning it out in new ways. Because the tools are cheap and easy and available. The distribution is cheap and easy and available. And what we're seeing now is we have more creative people producing stuff than ever before in human history. Incredible amounts. As I said before about YouTube, just look at how much is going up there. What we're seeing is more people now able to make a living at being an artist, being a musician, being a writer. People who otherwise couldn't have done that. And those are the people who are supported by their fans, supported by people who like them, rather than picked by a publishing industry. Do you guys know the theory of 1,000 true fans? 1,000 true fans was an idea, I forget who it was put forward by, I think it was, might have been Trent Reznor, who said if you're an independent artist, musician, or creator, all you need is 1,000 fans. And if those 1,000 fans love you, and they're going to buy one thing off you a year for a decent value, call it $25, or they'll give you a couple of dollars a month for you to keep doing what you do because they love you, that's all you need to make a living. 1,000 people, that's all you've got to find. Compare that to if you happen to be, if you're signed to a label or something, you're a writer where you're getting 10 cents a copy on a book or 15 cents a copy on a CD, you've got to have a hell of a lot more than 1,000 fans because you've got to support not only what you're making, but most of that money is going to the marketing companies, to the printing companies, to the distribution companies, to the retailers. By being able to engage directly with people, people with a very, very small niche audience can become professionals. And that, for me, is one of the most exciting things about the digital world because I've always worked there. So let's move on then to social relationships and etiquette and things like that. The first thing that I notice is the concept of friendship has changed. How many people have got people on their Facebook friends list that they've never actually met? Pretty much everybody, right? But they're your friends, and they're considered to be your friends in just the same way as people you know. Facebook and these other social media don't distinguish between that person you know and you spend every day with and you go to the bar with and you're best friends with and you do stuff together, and somebody you met once and exchanged details with. Quite often I refer to this as not so much social media as autistic media because it just has no sense of social context, and whatever you say, you're saying to absolutely everybody with no social context at all. But suddenly you have all these extra friends that you're relating to. And we don't really know how to relate to all of these people. Google Plus tried it with circles. That kind of didn't work. Should have done, saying, well, I want to talk to these people about that, and I want to talk to these people about that, and I want to talk to these people about that. It was way too complicated. But we all know that, if I'm sat at home with this bunch of people, we talk about that stuff and we talk about that way. If I'm over at my mother's house with my relatives and my cousins and my kids or my grandmother, I'm going to use different language. We're going to talk about different topics. We don't talk about them in the same way. Or if I'm down at the rugby club and it's 11 o'clock on a Friday night and we've just won a game or whatever, then the conversation's going to be whatever it is. And I certainly don't want my mum and my kids listening to that. Put it out on social media and everybody gets the full benefit of everything. So what we're having to do is we're having to create new concepts of social identity. One of the things that I do is I have a small company where we put on burlesque shows. And the burlesque performers there all have a problem because they have their professional identity as a burlesque performer where they talk about certain things and they put those kind of photographs up, and then most of them have day jobs. And they have to keep those entirely separate. It's the same with a lot of the artists, where they have fans who want to talk to them about their art, but they don't necessarily want to talk to their musicians or whoever. They don't necessarily want to talk to all their fans about where they're meeting up in the pub tonight or what movie they saw or whatever, because that's private. And we're having to redefine the concept of privacy. And I'm not going to talk here about governmental privacy and is the government snooping on you and tracking your credit card or your mobile phone or whatever. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I don't care. Because actually the people who are doing most damage to privacy is us. we're the ones going, I am going to tell the world everything I do. I'm going to tell people where I am. The government doesn't need to track me. I'm tracking myself. I'm checking in on Foursquare. Every time I post a status update, it tells you where I am. I'm telling you what restaurants I'm in. I'm telling you who I'm with. I'm telling people details that 10 years ago, you wouldn't sit in front of a room full of strangers and read out what was on your status updates. You just wouldn't do it. We're the ones who are changing the concepts of privacy. And we're only just now starting to ask questions like, what happens when I go for a job interview and my potential employer looks at all those pictures of me drunk lying on a sofa with Sharpie all over my face? It was really funny at the time. Now it's not. Should they even look at that? As an employer, I personally don't want to look at somebody's personal Facebook because I regard that as their own private business. But there are other employers who don't think that, who think that it is actually relevant because they want to know who they're employing and they're going to get a more accurate picture. My contention is you won't get a more accurate picture because everybody, when they're out there being social, whether it's on the internet or whether in person, is playing a role. They're acting as a persona. You're creating your own brand as to what you want to be. And I think what we're seeing now is people starting to develop their own concepts of how do I want to present myself in these different ideas, these different ways. And you guys are of the generation, because you've grown up with this, who are going to go through it and come out with new concepts of identity, whether you have one identity, whether you have multiple identities or whatever. That's going to be very interesting. But then let's look at going down also within friendships, within families. How many of you, for example, will happily pull out your phone and have a conversation with somebody on text or on Facebook or whatever while you're at dinner with somebody? No? Pretty much everybody. Let's be honest. You're out at a bar or somebody wants to talk. Like, oh, excuse me, just a second. Boom, 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 boom. And you talk. That would be considered pretty much the height of rudeness 10, 20 years ago. Now, it's normal. You sit around at dinner with the family and everybody's got their phones there. To the extent where, I love the concept of somebody having the phone bill game, where I said, all right, when you go to dinner with somebody, everybody put your phone in a pile in the middle of the table. First person to answer the phone picks up the bill. And pretty much it's the only way to stop people answering their phones. Because they have, I have to take this, it's a work thing. They're working. We were having dinner, weren't we? No. A lot of the time you go to parties or whatever, and everybody's sat there on their phone, on the laptop, partly because there's stuff going on that they don't want to miss. But more importantly, I realized something else. One of the side effects of running clubs is, you get to listen into what people are talking about. And it always used to be that you'd meet up with people on a Friday night or whatever, and you'd talk about what you did during the week. Here's the books I read, here's the movies I read, blah, blah, blah. This is my topic of conversation. And you'd share the gossip. Nowadays, you get there on the Friday night, and you've already shared the gossip. That's already happened. That's happened during the week. It's happened as it happened. You get there on the Friday night, and people go, what are we going to talk about? What are we actually going to talk about? It was a serious question. What are you going to talk about? And they don't. So they end up sitting there and suddenly going, oh, that's really cool, and then sharing Facebook statuses with each other from across the table because they found something, or texting each other from the opposite side of the room. Come on, everybody's done it, haven't they? That's the way we communicate. Parents and kids communicate differently. Again, I'm aware of the fact that my kids can read everything I post on the internet. My mom can read everything I post on the internet. Neither of these things is necessarily good, not from my point of view. From the point of view of parents, I can read everything my kids and my stepkids post on the internet. This is good up to a point. I can see what they're doing. But on the other hand, the internet means that kids are able to get hold of all sorts of stuff. I never saw any form of hardcore pornography until I was 25 years old and working on the internet, because you couldn't get it. It didn't exist to all intents and purposes. Now, is it 90-something% of kids have seen hardcore porn by the time they're 14? You know? And there's nothing that I as a parent can do to stop it. I can install any piece of software I like, and they will find a way around it, whether that involves going to a friend's house, or whether that involves deactivating it, or whatever. They will find a way to do it. They will find a way to look at anything they want to look at. And as we said before, with the huge range of cultural stuff out there, I can't stop them doing that. In one way, that's great. In another way, it's terrifying. They have mobile phones. The thing that I liked best about this was when I realized, people saying, why do your kids need mobile phones? When I was 15, I went wandering off around Europe for a month on my own, hitchhiking and going around on trains and going everywhere. My parents had no idea where I was. Nowadays, I can let my kids go out, and they're at the other end of a phone. Any kind of issue, they can call me. If they want to hitchhike home or get a ride from somebody, I go, okay, fine, you get a ride from somebody. Here's a tip for you. Take a photograph of the person who's giving you a ride. Take a photograph of their car license plate. Send it to me. I know exactly who you're with. Keep talking to me all the way you're home. They're safe. That's fantastic. That's unbelievably liberating for young people. And how we're reacting? We're reacting by telling people that, oh no, the world's full of pedophiles, the world's full of child murderers, and we try and lock people in and we keep them in. That to me is a big mistake. We should look at that as a liberating experience. But yeah, the way that parents and children interact is different. Because kids spend much more time locked away in their bedrooms with their computers, pretending to do their homework and actually playing video games or chatting online or whatever. They spend less time together. We spend much, much less time as a family unit than we ever did. We spend much less time in face-to-face conversation than we ever did. I've been addressing students for the last couple of years since I've been over here, and I've talked to universities all over the place. This is actually only the third time that I've actually been in the university where I'm doing the lecture. Most of the time, I'm coming in from overseas, from the internet. We're just used to the fact that people aren't physically present, and but we still have interactions with them. So, running on through here, politics and activism. Here's the last one. Not only businesses can communicate with people in different ways, but governments can communicate in different ways. Anybody who ever had to deal with filling in paper forms and getting hold of government brochures, it was the most horrendous experience. You thought the DMV was bad. It is nothing compared to the way that government bureaucracy used to be. Being able to go online and file my taxes, or go online and find forms for this, and go online and find stuff like that, it has really made a difference. All of a sudden, the government becomes a lot more functional. Not only that, but we can start to become aware of the fact that a public servant, a politician, they work for us. There's a site actually in Britain called theyworkforyou.com, where it reports on what each member of parliament actually does. And you sign up and say, this is my member of parliament, the equivalent to your senator or whatever, and they send you something. Every time they speak in parliament, what did they say? Every time they voted, how did they vote? Every time they're in a committee, what were they talking about? What were they doing? Every time they sponsor a bill, what are they putting forward? Okay. For the first time ever, I know what that guy does. I elected him to represent me in Parliament. Actually, I didn't vote for the guy, but that's not the point. I know what that man is doing on my behalf, and I can use that to decide whether or not he's somebody I want to do this again. Not surprisingly, a lot of politicians do not like this idea, but there's nothing they can do about it because it's all a matter of public record. Used to be public record was, it was stashed away in a library somewhere. It's now on the internet, it's available. That is a real shift in power. And if people don't like what they're seeing in politics, it only takes a few clicks to change, to say, we don't like this, we don't support that. Okay. Most of the time, it's probably not going to have that much of an effect. We all know a bit of cyber activism, 100,000 people saying something, so what? But on the other hand, Look at what happened when Wikipedia shut down for 1 day in protest against SOPA. And a bunch of other people changed suit. 50% of Congress changed their view on SOPA and went from saying, yes, we will back it, to no, we won't back it. Just because Wikipedia said, we don't like this. In the Arab countries, last year we had the Arab Spring. People were starting to share information and saying, we are not happy with our government and we want to get out there and deal with something. And they were on the streets. And being able to coordinate political protest via social media, being able to take their cell phones, record what was happening, send it out and broadcast it around the world. What happened? 7 countries collapsed. 7 countries changed their regimes in the space of a matter of months because people got up there and said, we're not happy. In London, they had riots last year, again, coordinated by social media, which spread around the country. Didn't matter how much the BBC wanted to clamp down, they couldn't, because ordinary people on the streets were saying what they thought. Pepper spray cop. That just took one little meme. Somebody photographing some cop spraying a bunch of people. That went round the world in hours. Literally hours of it happening. And it was getting tens of millions of views. And a bunch of people going, we don't like this. And politicians had to back off and go, okay, we're not sure what we're doing here. Because the important thing is knowledge is power. And the internet is a communication system. It's there for putting knowledge around. Research, you can find out things that would have taken months. You can find them out in literally minutes. Everything you want to know is just at the other end of Google. Wikipedia, it's full of errors. Guess what? It's full of exactly the same amount of errors as the Encyclopedia Britannica, which was held to be the gold standard for information. Wikipedia is a perfectly good way of finding out most of what you know. With a little bit of research, a little bit of looking around, check Snopes, you can find stuff out very, very fast indeed. And people do understand this. You don't have to be at your desk to find out anything. You want to know it, you can know it now. Yesterday I was talking to people saying it won't be very long before we start getting glasses where you can have Google stuff put up in front of your face. You're going, really? How soon's that coming? Well, today, actually. Google announced, yes, they're working on this thing. They have a Bluetooth implant, a voice-activated thing. You talk to your phone, you tell it what you want to know, it runs a search, and it puts the data up right here. Samsung are working on contact lens version of the same thing, which will probably be available in about 2 to 3 years. Anything you want to know, bang, right there in front of your face. This is Star Trek happening in front of us right now. Side effects of this. In 1999, Bill Gates wrote a book called Business at the Speed of Thought. He was wrong. Business does not happen at the speed of thought. Business happens faster than that. It happens faster than people can think. You don't have time to compose ideas and react to stuff. People want stuff now. It's the same. The fact that information spreads so fast means that nobody's controlling this anymore, insofar as anybody ever was. And something we all know, bad news spreads faster than good news. Misinformation spreads far faster than real information. I've lost track of how many celebrities have died on Twitter or Facebook, and then they're sitting there going, I'm not dead, I'm not dead. But it's all over the place. Everybody knows this has been shared 1 million times. Yeah. Misinformation spreads really fast. That scares the hell out of governments, it scares the hell out of businesses. It should scare the hell out of you. So, all those changing. The end result, what I'm saying here is, everybody has a platform. Because of digital media, you can hear from people throughout the whole world. You can say what you want to say, and nobody's going to stop you. Anybody tries to stop you, well, the Chinese government's trying, and everybody in the rest of the world hates them for it and is doing their best to bring it down. People are going to say what they want to do. The opportunity exists to hear new points of view. But as always, it comes at a price. as I've said before, you can reach a community of like-minded people, whatever your interest is. It doesn't matter whether your interest is in My Little Pony or whether it's in 19th century French embroidery or whatever. If your interest happens to be in extreme right-wing fundamentalism, if your interest happens to be in Islamic fundamentalism, if it happens to be in whatever, you can find those people out there who support and reinforce your points of view. And there may only be a small group of 50 to 100 people, but it's so easy to get locked in and go, those are my world, those are those people. And what you get is polarization and extremism. The technology is neutral. It's not about the technology, it's about what people do with it. You have the opportunity to share, to find, to learn more, or to find the people you want and dive in with those. So, in conclusion, I'm not interested so much as go, well, what has changed as a result of social media and digital media? But what hasn't? Really, what hasn't? We've already seen that the way we live and work is nothing like it was 20 years ago. My kids have grown up in a world where everything is a click of a button away or a voice command away, whether that's the time of the next movie or ordering a pizza and getting it to happen. They've grown up in a world where sharing is completely natural, whether it's legal or not. If you've got something, you share it with other people, whether it's a photograph or whether it's a movie you just got. They're growing up in a world where they're trying to understand who they are, who they want to present themselves as, what it means to be an individual, what it means to be part of a society, what it means to be part of a community. All of these have changed. And let's not kid ourselves that we've seen the change. What we've seen is change starting to happen because everything's accelerating. In the early part of this talk, I was talking about every 3 years seeing a new change. Later on, I'm getting to every year we're seeing a new change. When I first was asked to do this, I made notes in December. I was crossing them out last week because a whole bunch of stuff was irrelevant anymore, going, no, the world isn't, things have moved on since then, every few months. The world 20 years from now is going to be as different from today as today is from 1980, or from 1960, or probably from 1940. It's going to be incredible. 3D printers, for me, is probably the single most exciting technology coming out because all of a sudden we're no longer just sharing information. We're bringing that information into the physical world where you can manufacture objects in your own home. That's changing the whole world, not just of distribution and sales, but of manufacturing itself. All those objects, cheap objects you get around the place that say made in China, will now say made in your garage. And you're going to pay somebody a license to print stuff out. If you're just talking about plastic cups and plates because you want to have a party, you can bet you there's going to be Creative Commons versions of those because they're really easy to do. You print out a load of plastic cups and plates, you have your party, you wash them up, you throw them back in the hopper, you grind them up, and you turn them into something else the next day, whether that's a spare part for your car, whether that's a part for to repair your toilet, or whether that's a silly little Indiana Jones toy to put on your keyring. It doesn't matter. It's just plastic. Plastic, I think, is actually probably the only other major revolution we've had in the last few thousand years, which isn't a communications-based one. That's a technological-based one. And that has enabled an unbelievable amount of stuff. But what I will say is we will see new legal frameworks that are designed to cope with multinational businesses where consumers and customers and retail and everything is all happening all over the place and happening in cyberspace. We will see new political structures. We will see more changes to the way we live and work. One of the tragedies to me of the modern world is that when I was growing up, we knew that all this technology was coming in, it was going to liberate us, it was going to give us a whole lot more leisure time. Guess what? The average person now works 35% more than they did 20 years ago. That's wrong. As far as I'm concerned, can I work 35% less than my parents did, please, because I've got all these machines to help me? Are we going to have a small number of people with jobs and a lot of people without jobs? Or are we going to find some way of sharing it out so that everybody has what we might consider half a job? Who knows? Because actually, I have no idea how this is all going to pan out. What we do know is that digital media has enabled people to change the way they live, change the way they work, and they want to see those changes. Whether they're based in America, whether they're based in Europe, whether they're based in Saudi Arabia, whether they're based in Cameroon, anywhere. People want to see those changes. And they're turning around to the politicians and the businessmen saying, make it different. And the politicians and the businessmen are kind of left with a choice that they don't like, which is to try and hang on to things the way they are, in which case it gets kind of messy. That's what happened in the Arab countries and so on. Or to try and find some way to adapt. And are they going to go quietly? If you look at what's happened with media, Murdoch saying, I'm going to make people pay to read my newspapers online. Everybody turned around and said, then we're not going to pay. We're not going to read it. Don't want to know. And there's going to be a power struggle there, I think, between what people want out of digital media and what the vested interests in the elites want out of digital media, and what they want out of their society and what we all want to see. I literally have no idea how that's going to pan out. That's going to be decided in Washington, in Davos, in London, in Riyadh, in all those kind of places. And how are they going to adapt? But I'm going to leave you with one last thing, which is that shortly before I left Britain, I was seriously considering standing to be a politician. And I was going to stand on a policy of, I have no policies. I have no policies at all, because I realized that I could run an online poll of people which matched usually to within 1 or 2% what all the major polls were telling us about any given issue, just by taking a random sampling of people and going, what do you think? Just a show of hands. And going, I could represent my constituency by running an online poll and saying, what do you think? You guys, you tell me what you think. Do I vote yes or no on this one? If you say yes, I'll vote yes. If you say no, I'll vote no. And the only thing I'll do is try and explain to you the issues and say, here is the bill, here's what you're asked to vote on, here's what these guys said about it, here's what those guys said about it, you call it. I would love to have stood on that, because that to me is the nearest to democracy we're ever going to get. And it's actually within our grasp. We could do this. There is nothing stopping us doing this apart from getting the political getting the political people to understand. Let's do it. That's probably the most exciting thing that could possibly happen to our civilization, is really taking the whole concept of power from the top, taking it to the bottom, and using digital media to see how we want to govern our society. And the best thing is that it's going to happen in our lifetimes. We're going to be here to see it. And if we want to be, we can be part of it and pushing it on. So that's why I think digital media is the most fundamental thing to happen to our society. That's why I think social media is so important and why we need to know about it. Thank you.
Time for questions and answers. If anybody has some questions that the last hour has raised concerns.
I'd like to suggest that you left out the most significant effect of digital media, and that is the fact that it completely disassociates us from the planet on which we live. And we are creating a lot of junk that is harming the earth. And we have, the more that we spend time with these things that we're playing with, the less we know where we live. And to me, that's the most disturbing and effect of all this.
Okay, yeah, definitely understood. On the other hand, I'll turn this around another way. My house in England was absolutely full of stuff. It was full of books, it was full of VHS tapes, it was full of DVDs, it was full of CDs. Now, I have a few small electronic devices which have all of those things just as digital media, which I can get anywhere. That's a whole load of stuff that we're not manufacturing, a whole lot of plastics that aren't going into landfill, a whole lot of energy that isn't being used, making those things, distributing them, storing them, and going out. I can actually physically live in a smaller space because I'm not storing all of that stuff. So I'm not wasting energy heating if I was in England or cooling if I was in Florida, all of that space just to store these physical objects, which actually, most of the time, once I've read that book or once I've watched that movie or listened to that CD, I don't need them again. They're just wasting space. So yeah, I agree, we do have the situation, we do become dissociated from the planet, but on the other hand, there are opportunities to change manufacturing in that way. And at the same time, I'm very much more aware of the fact that when I was growing up, being a bit of a hippie and a bit of a greenie, you felt very odd because other people weren't sharing that view. Of course, now, as I said, the community's out there, and you can see the community outreach happening, of people talking to each other and saying, let's do something, let's change stuff. It always used to shock me when I was a member of Greenpeace how much stuff they would send me in paper and how much junk mail I'm accumulating. They can do all of that by email now. That's a lot of stuff that's not being wasted. So swings and roundabouts with all of these things. With the technology, as I said, the technology is neutral. It's what we choose to do with it that's important. I would love in many ways to go and live in a much more off-grid fashion. And to a large extent, social media allows me to do that. I can communicate with people no matter where I am. And as long as I have access to an internet with a reasonable amount of bandwidth, I can do most of the things that I normally do. I can live, I can work, I can talk to my friends.
Do you think the digital media has like infinite space to grow, or do you think it's going to come to a point where everybody's going to be like, all right, there's nothing else we can do?
Grow in what sense? In the sense of the amount of information or in what it's capable of?
What it's capable of.
I think the practical limit is when we get to the point of being able to generate artificial realities that we can't distinguish from real realities. Effectively, once we can create that Star Trek holodeck and we can create worlds that we live in, that's really as far as we can go. Whether those are a good thing or not, I don't know. As an entertainment, that's probably great. We could have a lot of fun with that. But I can see a lot of people just getting sucked into that. If you thought that Second Life was addictive, personally I hate Second Life, but other people do find them incredibly addictive. I can see people being completely drawn into artificial worlds. That's a scary concept, but people are building them. Augmented reality is one step there. And yeah, we are going to get to a point where this room could be whatever we wanted it to be. We could all be scattered around wherever we have to be. We don't have to be in the same. We don't have to be in the same city, but we can all really feel presence in the same room. I believe that's possible. Friends I know have been working on that kind of concept for about 20 years. It's still not that much closer because we just don't have the graphics processing capability, and we don't have the input capability. But look at something stupid like the Kinect. It's a really, really low quality camera, but it's good enough for people to be present in artificial reality situations with something that fits on top of a damn Xbox. It's really cheap technology, but suddenly I can see people using that. And now I think, again, within the next 10 years, we will see those artificial realities that you can effectively live in.
Not to focus again on the negative factors, but and not to be pessimistic, but I kind of agree. It feels like communication, while you can talk to somebody, thousands of miles across the world, is almost come to a communication breakdown where relationships and the strengths of relationships are being affected because you are so distracted. You can't sit down and not be on your phone. You can't sit down and not text and so forth. So I think that is a very important consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. I really couldn't agree more about the way that face-to-face relationships have changed and they've lost, and the fact that texting or Skype or whatever just is not the same as talking to people. I mean, it's one of those things that anthropologists and linguists will always throw at you, that 90% of our communication is non-verbal. And you just can't get that across in text. But at the same time, we are developing new languages. People are starting to understand how to use emoticons and things like that and understand what they mean. But in general, yeah, text communication and online communication is really poor as a substitute for face-to-face communication. I think we're all a lot poorer off. On the other hand, I'm not going to hear a word said against something like Skype because Skype is half the reason I'm here. I met my wife through a friend in Second Life, and we met in Second Life. Then we met in San Diego at Comic-Con. I went back to England and we continued our conversation for the next year or so over Skype, talking to each other every night, chatting on video or chatting on text or whatever. There is no way that that communication could have happened in a pre-digital media world. And after a while, I came over here, we got married, and I've been here ever since. So yeah, social media there actually enabled a personal relationship which could not have happened because there was no face-to-face option. I couldn't keep flying over here. And it enabled us to get a lot closer than any other previous form of medium. Not only that, but I think because we were able to have these conversations via text, and we were talking about very intimate subjects, getting to know each other, we had time to sit and consider our reply. And you could easily say things like, she'd ask a question, I'm going, how am I going to respond to this one? What do I want to say about it? Okay, BRB. Go away, think about how you answer it, and come up with a much more considered answer than if I'd been sitting face to face and I'd have probably said something dumb because I'm just going, how do I not look like an idiot? Say the first thing that comes into my head and reject it. So actually, again, the technology is neutral. It's how we choose to use it that's important. So that's just my counterexample to that one. But I do fully accept that most of the time, online digital communications is that it is inferior. It just enables you to do, it gives you breadth rather than depth. I think it's probably the way to look at it.
I'm kind of curious to hear what some other people here think, rather than it being all questions straight to Matt. I'd really like to hear other people responding to technology disassociating us from environment, from nature. We had lunch with a couple students today, and I was amazed that the two guys that we were having lunch with said the exact same thing. They said, I'm getting sick of always being a slave to my phone. So I'm cutting back on my internet access with my phone. I'm finding that I'm not paying attention as much in class. If I'm doing 13 different things. And I'm really just kind of curious to hear what people in this room think about that. That or this association from technology with someone face-to-face.
Well, I think like it goes both ways. I think it's a very good, it's like a positive and a negative at the same time. Where yeah, we kind of like you check our email and everything, be up to date with like when you give us updates on lectures and stuff like that. We have to check our email frequently to know what's going on. And that's actually like kind of bad, but at the same time it's good because we're on top of things. So when we come to class at 5 o'clock and wonder where everybody's at, we know that class actually started at 5:30 and it's a lecture. I mean, in both ways, I think it's good and bad, but I can see both sides of that.
It's tough then. Then you got to switch when classes, you got next quarter classes, and so you got to figure out how that professor interacts with the class. And
I mean, it's things when you have teachers that don't use technology at all, and like they're not very, they don't communicate with their students that much, and like that's a pain because why don't you use the technology that's given to you to communicate with your students when we have teachers like you guys that are giving us basically breaking news style emails of what's going on in class and what to expect and stuff like that, which is very nice. But I mean, it kind of gets annoying because like over break, winter break, my parents kept getting mad at me because I kept checking my emails and stuff about like my classes that I have the next quarter and stuff and all that kind of things. And I became like a huge user of Twitter and things like that. And I'd be eating dinner with my family and like me and my sister would be like talking to each other, Twitter back and forth, and my parents would kind of get mad, and like cause that's another way for me and my like sisters to communicate without them knowing like what's going on and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I guess it's interesting that this like topic came up today, especially like today with the shootings up at Chardon High School, like how quickly that spread through social media. And just talking about that today with the concept of space and everything and how things can travel so quickly. I mean, it was literally happened 7:30. Everybody, I know many people knew about it by 8 o'clock through Twitter, through the news, through Facebook and everything. And it's just amazing to me anymore how just dependent we are on it, not only to stay like socially connected, but connected with the world and what's happening, and how something so like what would normally be contained in a local area has become now this worldwide trend in a matter of hours. And it's absolutely incredible to see how fast things are capable of spreading.
Yeah, well, to pick up on that, one of the things that I find fascinating is I was talking earlier about letting my kids go out, and people are shocked and go, what with all these pedophiles, child murderers. The general perception, if you ask most people, is that the amount of danger that kids are in from these kind of people is huge and rising. The actual facts are that it's fallen rapidly throughout the whole of the 20th century. Kids are in less danger from pedophiles and child murderers than ever before. It's just that we're so aware of everything, that something happening 1,000 miles away or 5,000 miles away, or living in Britain, something that happens in a different country is being reported on, and it's a huge piece of news, and we all know about it. And you hear about this every week. There's a new one. You go, yeah. When was the last time anything actually happened around here? It's not as big, but the perception is very different. So, yeah, news travels fast. As you said, something which normally would have been local news suddenly becomes not just national, but it becomes international news, and people get a very distorted perception of what's real and what isn't as a result of that.
What I find also really interesting about that too is that how quickly people then respond, because it's not just, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. It's, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. What can I do to help? Oh, did you know that we're going to put together a fund, we're going to go and help these people, and all of a sudden people are not only able to get the news, but be able to respond on a personal level. I find that to be a really interesting trend that your generation has kind of embraced.
Just going off the time warp that social media has given us. I loved your point earlier about how it's so fast and it can be so beneficial to society, yet it could be traveling too fast for our own good. And with the advent of this speed in communication, if there's any false communication, that can be spread and just completely blown way out of proportion. So I just
Speaking of, Monday is the 5th of March.
I feel like even though technology is as important as associated with teaching, in terms of what we're producing and consuming and throwing out, it blurs that line between what would have been a local environmental disaster and what then becomes a demand for more information, such as the BP web scope. 20 years ago, after day 20, no one would have been paying attention to it. But day 40, we're still getting updates because the demand for it and the interconnectedness of everybody is pushing back.
I mean, did anybody else actually watch them try to cap that well? Putting this stuff on, and I'm going, they're streaming this live on the internet, and I can be in the Gulf of Mexico underwater watching them try and cap this thing. That was fascinating. I also love the fact that a little while ago we were setting something up for my son, and they wanted to talk to people on the International Space Station. And we coordinated this thing that these guys were going to appear on Skype. Nothing special, just Skype. We were sending emails to the space station at the point where they were actually over the horizon. We couldn't communicate via email or Skype. I was sending texts to the ISS, and I'm going, man, I'm sending texts into space. How cool is that? And then what we were seeing there was being broadcast, and some of them were watching it on Skype on their laptops, and there were other people watching on Skype on their phone. Okay, wow, that's incredible. The amount of telepresence you can get out of that, the involvement you can get with stuff. When I was growing up, space was a huge thing. I can't tell you how inspired I was by the fact that I was old enough to see people land on the moon. I remember watching people playing golf on the moon. I remember people watching people driving cars on the moon. You guys have never had that, and I'm really sorry you've never had that experience, because it's amazing. I live down near Cape Canaveral, and for the last 2 years I was watching space shuttles taking off over my house and going, wow, and now it's gone. Because things like that really inspire people to do more, and go, this is something that takes the whole resources of a massive nation to do. And being able to take stuff and say, hey kids, we're going to show you what these guys up in that shuttle, up in that station are actually doing. And I've never seen a bunch of kids so inspired in my life. And purely just be able to put that stuff onto their mobile phones and show them, and then they've recorded it and they're taking it home to people and say, this is what we did in school today. Whoa, that's cool.
Starting college, I've realized that half my college textbooks are actually available online for purchase. I think it's absolutely amazing that you have this entire library online that anyone can access. You might have to pay a couple dollars to get a couple books, but you know, if anyone was interested in a topic, they could become an expert on this topic without ever paying for a college degree.
Yep, absolutely. Academic publishers they absolutely loathe the concept of digital books. You're saying, you're selling your book for $180. Well, come on, who the heck wants to pay $180 for a book when you could turn around, you could put that online, and more colleges. I'm fascinated by the fact that around the world, there's a lot of places. Singapore is leading in this one. South Korea is really hard going. No more paper textbooks. We're just going to give every kid an iPad, and it's going to be loaded with all the books you need for your entire college career, and there you go. Bang. Done. Everything you need right there. And just turn around to the academic publishers and go, there's a token payment, take it or leave it, we're not going to buy. We're not going to ask kids to pay for these books. I wish Florida school board would do the same, because I hate how much I have to pay for my stepkids'
The
books.
question becomes to me is, as a writer of those books, if I'm not being paid, will I stop writing? And when you get to a point where everybody stops producing new knowledge because it's not monetarily feasible.
You don't need a publisher, though. That's the thing. The publisher is taking most of that money. They pay academics a pretty low amount for writing those textbooks. You could write that textbook yourself, put it right out there, and okay, you're not getting paid maybe $100 a book, which is what the publisher's getting, but they might offer you $5 a book for the digital one.
I need my 1,000 true fans.
You got your 1,000 true fans, exactly. Those 1,000 captive students. So, yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, we were talking about social media earlier and how it can almost be detrimental to kids. And as a teenager myself, you definitely feel that pressure, where you realize you're wasting so much time on Facebook. You're doing all this stuff with Twitter, so you almost I think everyone in this classroom has almost tried to give up Facebook at some time, and then you realize that you can't. I have clubs that I'm in for school here, and I can't quit Facebook because then if I do, I don't get any updates. If I try to set down my phone and I don't text or call people, I'm not going to talk to anyone, I'm not going to have any friends.
Yeah.
So it comes to that fact where if you try giving up your computer or your smartphone, you become a shut-in and you become isolated. So there's always that balance where you got to manage your time.
I'll tell you, it's not just teenagers. You can be in your mid-40s and still have problems giving up Facebook, trust me. What you have to do, and this is something I really had to force myself to do because I work from home, I work online, a lot of what I do is marketing via Facebook. And of course it's so easy to get trapped into whatever else is going, and you have to be absolutely ruthless with yourself and go, my personal Facebook time is going to be this and this during the day, and then I'm not going to do it. It's a lot harder than you think. There was a great meme going around a little while ago, which, if I'd done slides, it's the one I was going to end with. We said, threatening to quit Facebook is the 21st century equivalent of threatening to run away from home. Everybody I know at some point has said, I'm going to quit Facebook, I've had enough of it. Yeah, all right, you'll be back. And that's why when you delete your Facebook profile, they actually hold it for you for 6 months. Not just because they're evil and they want to hold all of your data, they're holding it because they know you'll be back and go, oh, when I said I quit Facebook, what I really meant was I don't need 3,000 friends, I just need 120. There's an anthropological number called Dunbar's number, which is, what is the maximum number of people to whom you can relate? And the answer is about 120. More than that, you just can't cope with remembering who these people are and what you have to do, and societies are too big. And that fixes pretty much the size of how big villages are, how big communities are, how big kibbutzes are, how big the religious communities are. It's about 120 to 140. Over that, it explodes. And when they start monitoring people, the research they've done on things like Facebook and Twitter, and go, if you've got more than 120 to 140 friends, it stops working. because too much information is going through. So yeah, rather than quit Facebook, just remove those people you don't actually know. Again, they're not really my friends, they're just people I met. Try that instead.
Okay, just to let everybody know, the next Converge speaker is going to be Thursday, March 1st at 7 p.m. in Walter Hall. It will be Rob McLaughlin, and that will be an excellent speaker as well. Thank you very much.